Hey everybody, welcome to the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I'm your host, Robert Davis. Appreciate you all tuning in, listening to my thoughts. Um, Follow me on social, Instagram, RTD underscore III, Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Appreciate you all for the support, for tuning in. All the engagement, the comments I've gotten back, feedback I've gotten back. Really appreciate it and hope to keep more episodes coming out for you all to listen to. So with that, kind of wanted to jump into the topic of today's show, which really kind of is almost a few. It almost seems like it's a few years too late and yet current at the same time, and that's really just the pandemic. And for me, I guess in terms of this particular conversation, I'm not talking about COVID when I talk about the pandemic. I mean, COVID being the reason because of the pandemic, what caused the pandemic. But I'm talking about more or less the social epidemic that the pandemic kind of caused. I'm not saying social epidemic that it caused, but the social part of the pandemic, the quarantine, the quarantine was actually kind of a big part of that. Um, the reduced amount of communication, and seems like the how people kind of just lived a completely different life during quarantine, hobbies that they picked up. Kind of a stir craze a lot of time for people being trapped in the house and not being able to travel or go places they wanted to go. And so, it was a historic time for all of us, and unprecedented. A lot of people couldn't go to work, just being told that your job isn't necessary and there's nothing that you can do about that. You know, um, it was a lot of things that were going on that we hadn't seen before, or at least not in this lifetime. And I think, at least in America, I should say. And I mean, I think it's kind of dragging effect on us because again, COVID was bad. Like the virus COVID-19 that killed, was it like 1%, 2% of the population. I think it was 1%. That's still hundreds of thousands of people, not millions. Quite might be like that's horrific. And as bad as that was, the pandemic, the social, the people that the depression and the kind of negative habits and behaviors that all came from that area. The people that lost a lot of hope. I mean, a lot of people died from ways that were COVID related. Even I mean, were pandemic related that wasn't COVID. From loneliness, from sadness, from being separated from people, from being worried pretty much to death in terms of kind of like the constant state of fear that the media was in at that time talking about COVID. And I think it just that all those added elements that went along with just the virus itself was just a horror show. And it's had pandemic had its lasting impact on every corner of our society. You know, from businesses and how they conducted themselves. A lot of businesses still aren't. I'm not saying a lot, but there's businesses that still aren't opened up fully. In terms of pre-COVID, dining rooms opened up fully. Places still can't get staffed fully. Places still fighting the back to work compared to virtual work battle. And I mean, that's just business. Socially, a lot of places are still, people are meeting and gathering again, but there's still some places that are social distancing or practicing certain techniques or methods. Some not. Some want to put it in the past. Some think it's, a sign of things to come. And I think just how we've interacted socially in terms of just in restaurants and airports and mass gatherings is just now different. And it feels like we still haven't fully recovered from it, and I think that's because it requires such sudden change, and the world isn't really one that is adapted to sudden change, which that really overnight required like the whole world to implement these methods everywhere, had to implement methods that you just hadn't seen before, like in a large scale, I should say. And I think, it does cause some sort of hangover. It does. Um, and when it's that large scale, it has to assume that that hangover will take time, and that hangover will, be something that won't just be a few months or something like that. Like we've been out technically out of the COVID crisis for what, like 2 years now, almost as long as the COVID crisis was. COVID as a crisis might have been 2.5, almost 3 years. And so, we find ourselves in this, and we're kind of just, it's almost like we're sleepwalking the effects off of it, or we're still kind of like dazed from just that whole point in time. And it's just like so many people are just, you hear them say, like, man, it felt like 2021 was just yesterday. Like, we're already in 2025. And it's just like that. It's kind of just like we're just walking through what just happened to us. Kind of like we just got to get our bearings type of thing. And so the question of why it matters, right? Well, I mean, I think it matters because, like, as I was just talking about, the impact is almost is. I don't want to say this in the sense of like comparing tragedy, but it's noticeable, almost like 9/11 was noticeable in terms of the impact that it's had on our society. Again, with work, with I mean, a lot of places are going back, but they're just now, a lot of places are just now kind of getting everybody back to, I guess, how they want it to be work wise in terms of virtual versus in office. Um, Stores and retail and entertainment still really hasn't, it's gotten back out there, but it's still trying to fight that virtual, everything virtual battle that a lot of people are preferring, that kind of was taken on during the pandemic. I mean, just in general, a lot of the world was shown that a lot of 80% of things could be done virtually in today's society. Now, the positives and negatives to that are there to discuss, but in terms of just getting it done, that was there. And I think, it's, when I say similar to 9/11, it's almost like, hey, you remember the world pre-pandemic? Like, you remember how flying was? I was a kid, but you remember how flying was pre 9/11, where you could just walk somebody up to the gate and it was real lackadaisical? Like, remember how events were and and businesses were pre-COVID, when places, I remember as a worker working in a state job, I remember going to work every day, 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 8 to 5. Sorry, 5 days a week. Like Friday in the office, 4:30. Compared to now, where a lot of jobs are requiring people to come back. But I mean, then like I had a job during COVID where for a year and a half we were completely virtual every day. So it's interesting how things have come to where I can say now, and it's like, well, I remember, you know, working in the office every day, and a lot of people are just like, that's a foreign relic at this point. I remember going to restaurants and them being packed, and them and everybody having like a store closing down because they didn't have staff. Just like not like scheduled, just like on a Tuesday shift, they just don't have anybody, so they got to close. That used to be unheard of. Like we didn't have like so many supply chain issues where it used to be like, oh, people would fight to keep these things from happening. Now since COVID, and there's so many kind of like cracks got exposed in terms of shortages on things that were rising in prices, like chicken wings, eggs, again, cheese. What was the paper towels? Like all these different things that were toilet paper. All these different things that were running out, and it just seems like now shortages are just expected. You kind of just like the great resignation that happened during COVID. It's like now, bad. I don't want to say that's a reflection of bad service, but now it's like you just expect bad service, or you just take bad service from places or people as it comes, because it's just you get what you get in terms of workers now. And so it's I think it's just that impact is just very noticeable to me. And we definitely haven't gotten back to whatever the quote unquote normal is. I don't think, just like any major event, the normal isn't going to be what it was before, but it has to be something other than where we're at now. I think we're coming back out of it, and I don't think that's just because people are going to work or something like that. No, I think the pandemic showed a lot of different positives of how life goes on, or life will find a way, and it also shows a lot of negatives of how, if we completely isolate ourselves, where that will take us as well. But we haven't gotten back to that sense of normalcy yet, and we have to. Um, and I think part of it is because people have a lot of leftover feelings from the pandemic. Anxiety, aggression, theories, mistrust, miscommunication, um, communication, like, and I think people carry a lot of different type of feelings over how it was handled, the things that went on. People became entrenched in battles over simple things like wearing a mask or not, taking a vaccination or not, believing that the virus is real or not. Um, and I think, we when COVID just we were told that, oh, it's no longer a major, not gonna say a major threat, because people are still catching COVID and dying. Let me be clear about that still during this conversation, that COVID is still an active virus going on that people are still suffering from. But I think when it was like the CDC and everybody was saying, okay, we have kind of a curve, the numbers are curving down. We have a hold on this to a degree, and we don't consider it a major health crisis to the general public anymore. Well, I think it was hard for people to just, like, it's not hard for us to let it go, I mean, because we we we've been here. I mean, like, we've been living in it, and we've all wanted COVID to end, whether we like being at home or not. We all wanted COVID, the virus, to end, or like the experience of this pandemic thing to end. And so, like, I think when there was just so much different things going on in the world, and so many different arguments about what was going on, and so many different just running factors, when it was just like, okay, it's no longer an issue, it was hard for people to let that stuff go. It really was. And I mean, it's understandably so why it was hard to let it go. Um, because, like, if you believe that the government was lying to you about the vaccines, and they were some sort of poison or mind control or whatever the case may be, and then just, oh, now everybody's just not talking about vaccines anymore, and it's just whatever, you don't need them anymore, or whatever the case may be, and you're just supposed to drop that and say, okay, and just go on with your life. Yeah, I could see you being like, no, I'm still on that, because that was a major thing that everybody was telling me I had to do. Like, I can understand it. And I just think there was a lot. And for people, like somebody that felt like I had a close relative that died because people weren't taking this virus, or this thing seriously. people close to me personally that I feel like if they would have, this wouldn't have happened. Then yeah, I can understand when it's like, oh well, COVID is no longer an issue. I'm still gonna be on that. So I get the hold up, but I think that's definitely been an issue that people are still kind of carrying a lot of those feelings from it. And the other thing is, I don't why I think this matters is that it seems like because so many people saw a lot of different cracks in society, whether it was with people, whether it was supply chain, whether it was businesses with people, like literally human supply workers and supply workers, um, whether it was with just breaking down over the news and the constant reporting of the mass amounts of deaths that were happening and the mass amount of heartbreaking stories and situations that people were in, the political climate that happened because of COVID. Um, I think it's almost like the world kind of almost did like a Joker thing and went insane because it seems like no one really takes anything seriously anymore. And prior to my last episode of this podcast, where I was saying people like, why is everything so serious? Like, and I was saying in that episode that it's like, we suck the fun out of everything that's, for fun, unserious. Like, we make it such a big, serious thing. And then anything that really requires our attention, we just kind of like, oh, yeah, fuck it, whatever, blah, blah, blah about. This is the other half of that. It's like, why are we. It seems like anything that's really got something to do with seriousness about what's going on in this country, we just kind of are like, oh, whatever about. Not even just this country, just everyday life. Like, take it out of our country, a patriotic sense. You know, businesses, people don't like going out to eat anymore because they feel like you just expect to have shitty service. And if you complain about it, people are just like, whatever. And it is what it is. You get what you get. And a lot of people feel like, it's that sort of sense of the world now where things that, it used to be expectations of how things go. It seems like it almost isn't anymore. And everything is just kind of lackadaisically, it is what it is. You get what you get, hope for the best. And I mean, I think that's because, again, that people saw so many cracks in our society that always that kind of thing that kept us going, people working that extra mile to keep, and probably in their mind, the world from falling apart or whatever it is doing from falling apart. And people saw things fall apart and just saw that eventually, somebody picks the pieces up to whatever degree and shit gets back to running. And so when they saw that was the case, they said, oh, okay. And just left it at that, and said, I'm not afraid of what's the worst that can happen. It's the what's the worst that can happen type of mentality now, I guess. And then people are also more irritable now than ever. I think that's another reason this matters, this conversation about the pandemic. And I think that's also, that carries on about, the other things I was talking about everybody being more irritable and anxious because of just a lot of that tension that was left over from the pandemic, just a lot of that change, and then being told slowly, not even being told slowly to change back, but just being kind of like left into, so what do we do now? And nobody says anything type of feeling. That's what it feels like to me, at least. And so it seems like there is a lot of irritation and anxiety that people walk around with now, that I think were heightened, if not started from the pandemic. And I think, they have to be addressed for people to really be able to move on and for us to kind of really come into what is this new stage of the world that we're living in. And I know, these things take time. It's not like you expect anything to just kind of like happen overnight, but they do eventually kind of have to come. And so, what are some examples of kind of like things that we're talking about, right? So people are in fear of reliving another pandemic. And I think we've all seen kind of that variations or examples of that. I think a lot of people are like, I'm not going back, not going to go back to you telling me, beyond just the virus itself and the fear of another thing running through making people sick. 'Cause I had COVID twice myself. It's not nothing to play with. Like, I think people are also in fear of being told they can't work, being told they can't travel, being told they can't socialize, and being kind of put into what they believe to be a kind of an isolationist type of box. And when they're told that, they don't care whether it's supposed to be quote unquote for their good or not. They just view it as a restriction on them. And I think seeing that, and then the doomsday type of time that, like I said, the media and everything predicted. And I don't want to say doomsday type of time like I'm like, oh, it wasn't that bad and they didn't have to report all that, because it was that bad and they did have to report all that. Just saying that, when you see that 24/7, it does, like, that's the message that it's sending. I mean, and truthfully, but that is the message that it's sending. And, along with that fear, as I talked about a little bit a few minutes ago, is that anger about how it was held, or how the pandemic was handled, I should say. And we've seen, again, people that are still mistrusting the government. You all put that poison in your body, you're going to be dead, and whenever they say so, or mind control, or people saying, oh, you can't be near me because you would have had my people, my family killed by not being able to be vaccinated or spreading the virus. And it's so much distrust and disagreement and division over so many different areas of the pandemic, whether that was, whether to wear a mask or not, whether to get a shot or not, whether you should be out socializing with people or not, who can come to your house, who can't, how do you handle people that you're close with that are, their vaccination or their methods, they're not following the same methods that you feel comfortable with. It was so many different things that went on, and that people still carry anger from, in terms of just those situations, and fear of going back to, that we've all seen, we all feel them. And I think, those people, I pray first that we don't go back, so that they don't have to go back into those situations. But I mean, I think those are prime examples of just kind of where that pandemic hangover exists at in our society. Another thing I think, and this is just me on my soapbox for a second, I do believe that a lot of the inflation crisis that we're in and the economic disarray that we're in is because of the pandemic, in terms of the stimulus checks that went out, and in terms of the mass amount of, not just the PPP loans that citizens were getting, but even more importantly, the business loans that all these corporations and billionaires were getting. I think a lot of free money was issued out during the pandemic, and just generally, as government is mad inefficient. And I think, beyond all the inefficient money issued out to dead people, to people that were scam accounts and everything like that, and to all the people that were frauding out, whether it was somebody in the hood trying to take a $10,000 or $20,000 loan, compared to some millionaires taking $20 million loans, and nobody had any intention of paying this stuff back, compared to just all the individual stimulus checks that everybody got, which wasn't a lot, but still everybody getting $1,200 is a lot of money to issue out. And I think because of all of that, this is the repercussions of it, of all that free money that went out. And I think, like most things, the rich that got a lot of benefit of it are rich enough to shield themselves from the impact of it. But even they're feeling the price of this inflation type of crisis, where everything, I mean, not just like, oh, one thing is, but everything. Everybody's saying everything is up now, compared to, oh, your power, Yeah, well, it costs more for us to provide it. Well, it costs more for us to provide eggs. It costs more for us to provide homes. It costs more for us to provide you water. Like everything across the board is going up astronomically right now. And I think part of it is because of that influx of money that came to everyone during the pandemic that the government, quite frankly, is going to find. I don't know if it's the government in this particular sense, but the way how economies work is that when you put out all of that money, then something has to happen. It's either that the price value has to go up for things has to go up, or the value of the dollar goes down. And I think that's what we're seeing now is just the price of things are going up because there's a lot of money that's just been I think they're trying to recoup on. I guess I should say. I know that's not 100% how the economic theory works, but at least that's my view on it in a rough sense. And then, from a business sense, I don't know how many stores, and I know you all have seen them, how many stores are still understaffed, closing randomly. I talked about this a few minutes ago. Unreliable service, restaurants, anywhere. Over reliance on making you do everything yourself. Where if I would have, I mean, you can go in the stores now and because they have self serve everything, the people working at it, like they don't even want to talk to you because it's almost like you're bothering them. And I think these are just examples of another example of kind of that pandemic hangover where a lot of businesses were again forced to close early, forced to close unexpectedly, forced to deal with things from their workers that they wouldn't have dealt with before. And I think that a lot of that still is in play today. Um, it's funny because my aunt used to say, she didn't understand where everybody was getting this money to live from if nobody was working. And I laugh about that because it's really like she's not lying. I don't understand it myself. But the way that service in business and service industries has changed since the pandemic is quite noticeable because it's almost not like, I mean, you know, it never wanted to be. I was a former bartender. I never want to be like, oh, the customer's always right because the customer can sometimes be a dick and sometimes make your day hard. But you still had to serve the customer. Like the objective of the day was to give the customer the best experience possible, or at least a good experience. Where now it's just like the objective is for me to get through my shift, and whatever you get out of me, you get out of me. It's whatever I feel like giving you. And I think that's just a crazy difference in just how things have shifted now compared to where they were back then. And I say back then like a long time ago, but a few years ago, pre-pandemic. Um, and then one big thing is schools, right? Like, and I want to talk about the post before I talk about the during pandemic with schools. Because, and I talk with my friends about this a lot, especially those that have kids, that the schools have been closing down a lot more out of precaution lately, especially with the different weather we've had, especially here in North Carolina. Like, and it seems like, they used to, that the kids had to make up the school days, lengthen out the school year. And now a lot of those times, those days are recouped through just, they do virtual instead. And even though, a big argument about the necessity of reopening schools during the pandemic was how kids were not really taking to virtual learning because they need that in-person instruction, they need that structure, a lot of times that school provides, that a social environment that school provides. And it's interesting to me that us knowing that, I do agree with that as well, that it's important to have schools be open in whatever way is safe for, the children, teachers, staff, everybody involved, parents, everybody involved. But it was quite interesting to see that when, even though that was such a hard arguing point that schools need to be open during the pandemic because of the impact that virtual learning, the negative impacts that virtual learning was having on children, virtual school, I should say, not virtual learning, but virtual school was having on children. The school systems have been so heavily and easily reliant on using it as a substitute for having to make up school days or when there's inclement weather. And a lot of parents are frustrated because they feel like their children aren't learning and barely going to school. And when they're out doing the virtual learning, it's not really doing much for them, or it's not a lot either. And so that's one thing I just wanted to start in terms of the post hangover. Is just kids. I think just school is the seriousness of school seemed to have went down, for one, because school seemed to be a lot more. It's a lot easier for them to cancel class, or it's a lot easier for kids just to not be in class that day. And I think that's a big issue. And then on the other half of it, the during side obviously was where, you know, I think a lot of people, especially those that graduated during the pandemic, are really feeling the impact of not benefiting from I don't want to say a proper education, but a lot of kids were just pushed through. They graduated during the pandemic that weren't trying, weren't going to class, weren't logging on, weren't turning in assignments, just out doing whatever, and got pushed through because the school system didn't want to have that many repeat student on their hands. And they weren't doing those kids justice. And some of those kids are struggling now. Either they're trying to find work, or they're trying to get an associate's degree, or they're not doing anything. And I think you don't do those kids any justice by just pushing them through, which again to me is an issue that happened from the pandemic, and it's almost similar to what's happening with the kids now. Is that it seems like with schools you're just trying to push them through, we're just trying to get them by. We don't have to make up this day, we'll just do virtual, and yeah, they just need to be online for an hour. Like that will substitute for them missing like a whole day or 2-3 whole days of school. And so I know I'm not a school official or anything like that, so I can't tell them exactly what is the way to go about changing that. But I do identify with the fact that there is an issue in terms of these kids not. And just the teacher shortages and the stress that was put on teachers and administrators since COVID. A lot of them, not feeling like they're getting paid enough, feeling like, especially since COVID, that the kids are a lot more unruly, a lot more misbehaved. A lot of people, especially guys I work with, feel like they can't work with kids because they don't want to put hands on them. A lot of parents don't allow their children to be disciplined, so their children are undisciplinable, coachable, instructable. And I just think that this. I think a lot of parents had to spend more time with their kids than what they were comfortable with during the pandemic. And since then, I'm not sure if that would had a positive or negative impact on some of them. But there's a lot of parents that aren't really willing to give their child the structure. They may be willing to be a parent that loves their child, but they're not willing to give them the proper structure for them to be successful in life. And I think that those type of faults were heightened because of the pandemic, and a lot of it is dragging out post the pandemic. And then we've seen about the battle between telework and return to the office. A lot. I don't have to go on too long about this one. Like a lot of organizations, a lot of people felt like, especially during COVID, they didn't have to work anymore, especially not in the office. Like, let me say, rephrase that. They didn't have to work in the office anymore, that everything could be done virtually. And, a lot of organizations pay a lot of money renting out big office spaces or buying big office spaces that they wanted back. A lot of places claimed either with validity or with no validity that, virtual work was hurting their bottom line, so they needed people back. Some places said that virtual work is helping our bottom line, so we're willing to do um, hybrid schedules. We're willing to do, consistent virtual work. Um, a lot of jobs are more. I mean, a lot of jobs did move to just strictly, hey, we can do hybrid or we can do virtual on a just flat basis. And I think that going from pre-COVID to where we was in the office every day to during COVID where you're never in the office, or if you was, it was almost bare minimum because you was an essential worker and you had to be under so many, your job, people just weren't coming in and out, and you can only keep a certain amount of people in, and so on and so forth. And compared to now, where it's like some are, some aren't. Some people, you work virtually. Like my job is hybrid, and but even when I'm in the office, most of my meetings are still done via Zoom. Like so, you the whole concept and the virtual meeting concept, I don't think people, I think the face to face, large face to face meetings and the meetings every day is just a dead concept. Whether you're in the office or not, I think Zoom is the way, virtual is the way that people want to go in terms of that. But it's definitely I mean, it's definitely the impact that it's had on our society in terms of just where work is and where work is going in that telework type of phase is noticeable. I mean, everybody strives to want to kind of be where you can have virtual work applied, and just um, it'd be interesting to see what's like 5 years from now if it's still a thing. Because I know a lot of places are restricting back. It'd be interesting to see if it goes back to being kind of like a niche type of job attribute, or if it's still something that kind of is majorly talked about. Um, Another example was that a lot of people relied on social media to cope, and I think social media and technology to cope during the pandemic, and I think we've seen the impact of that. Not only do I think we've seen the impact of that, I mean, I think that we've seen how valuable these companies have. Meta. I think Meta owns Snapchat. I think it's on Instagram as well, um, and then TikTok as well. Not they own it, but TikTok. We've seen how valuable their uh, valuations and their stock prices have become. How many people have logged on to them, being at home with nothing else to do. And we've seen the emergence of social media as a major life platform: news, sports, media, entertainment, comedy, education, information in general. Like we've seen that spread. And to we're in one of my previous episodes where we are talking about a lot of people having social media be their third place. We've seen that grow as a way of coping with losing certain elements of freedom or the real world through the pandemic. And it's interesting because people will eventually, I think, as we come further out of COVID and as we come, God willing, into more of a the world is safe again type of thing. Hopefully, um, there is a what's the word I'm looking for? There will be a need to de plug or unplug from the constant social media influence or the constant technology influence. And it'll be interesting to see if people are willing to do that or not. Um, and so, if we're talking about concerns that I guess are had regarding this kind of pandemic hangover, I mean, the first I think is the impact that the constant doomsday type of reporting had on us or has on us. And I think the way that COVID was reported during the pandemic, a lot of things I feel like are reported like that now. Um, Anytime, I mean, and I think it's when I say this, it's not just reporting truth in fact, but it's more or less this need to kind of not give your viewer hope. I think as a news reporter, it is understand. I mean, it is your job to report the news and its truth, and however hard or blunt that may be. But I think as also as human beings, we have to report these sort of things with a glimmer of what's of something to look into, some sort of hope, like Pandora's box, like the glimmer of hope from that, like something to look into, whether that is, what people are doing to fight it, what people are, what plans are in place, or who are the people working on it, or something that allows people to look at the bad and see something good from it still. Because without that, I think you cause more panic and chaos through just constantly trying to show people that the world is burning. And that concerns me because a lot of people, I think, came out of the pandemic with that we're in the last days type of vibe. And I mean, it's hard not to agree with them, right? But like, I don't think if we don't try to think positively, like I've always said that the end of the world is a mind state and not an actual actor or day. Like if everybody believes that the world is ending, then the world will end because nobody's trying. No, like is everything just like fuck it, whatever. Like if people live with love, compassion in their heart, then the world will have love and compassion because the people in it have it. And so some people have, are stuck in that post-pandemic lag, and we were just talking about that because of the fear, the anger, the doomsday reporting, because of bad habits they picked up during COVID, reliance on social media or being alone or just trying to come out of all of that. It's a lot of people stuck in that lag, and that's concern because as years go by, and again, society will take time, but as years go by, we have to eventually come out of it. And so it's and so whether it's us trying to reach to each other and find ways to comfort each other, because people are still struggling with shit from then and post pandemic, but people are still struggling with stuff. And so I think to get us out of that lag, we do have to have empathy towards one another. And I think that's something that's at an all-time low in our world right now is empathy towards your fellow person, not just people but like towards your fellow humanity in a general sense. And I think until we do that, we're going to have that struggle. And we've definitely come further away from humanity as a result, which is another concern. As from the pandemic, we came further away from humanity in terms of we became more willing to be isolated, less caring about one another, less caring about just humanity in a general sense of just what was going on in the world. We became more cynical towards everything. And I think that it goes back to that end of the world type of mentality where everybody is just in this kind of like whatever fuck it stage, and the world is in a whatever fuck it stage. But in order for us to come back towards humanity, we have to look within ourselves and say, okay, how do I show love and warmth towards my fellow person? And how can I be a better human being? And, the concern that one of the concerns I have is that what is the state of our society if another pandemic happens right now? Which it easily could. We talked, but there's been a few other viruses that come out that, thank God, none has been as widespread or as dangerous. But like, what if we have to go back into another pandemic for another 2.5 years? There's a lot of people that will legitimately lose their mind. And I think we have to, that's a problem because so many people are still dealing with stuff. And so many people, it feels like we're all walking around waiting for it to happen again. It's like, and if it did, I don't know how we would cope. People would go back into that end of the world. Oh my God, this is just going to keep happening. We're never going to go into it. Violence would come up again. I mean, it's still up now, but like violence, random violence, people harming themselves, all these things in my mind would skyrocket because of just, it doesn't seem like we're in a stable place to handle another widespread world changing event like that. And if it when it's something that could occur so easily, it just seems like we have to be better prepared. And not just better prepared, but mentally strong and mentally tough, which I don't think that we are. Um, and I think part of that is that because it feels like we're in a wait and see type of thing from our government, we don't have a lot, in my opinion, we don't have a lot of strong leadership. I thought we had strong leadership during COVID with like Dr. Fauci and the CDC. Like, I don't think they did everything 100% right. But I think given the cards that you're dealt and you're trying to protect the whole nation and essentially the world, I think they with a disease or a virus that looks just like the common cold or the flu, like with something that you can't easily just identify. I think they did a good job, all things considering, and I think they had good intentions, and where they could have did better, it wasn't because of any nefarious or deceptive intent. With that being said, it feels like since we kind of came out of the COVID isn't a major issue thing anymore, which may have been about a year or so before Biden's term, and it may be a year and a half. It seems like we've been in this kind of wait and see type of mentality where nobody seems to know what it is going on. What are we doing? It's just, oh, we wait and see. What's going to happen? Are we, do we need to throw away our masks now? Like, am I keeping them around? Like, do I still need these vaccination cards? And everything just kind of like, they don't know. And I think because of that, from our government, from the people that are supposed to give us that guidance, that's why a lot of this kind of anxiety still lives, is that a lot of people are just kind of like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know if this is still a problem. The government doesn't seem to be saying anything about it, so maybe not, but it could be, and I think, when we get some sort of clarity or guidance on that one way or the other, it would help relieve some of that. And to that point, could we even agree on a unified action if needed? That's another concern, not the biggest. If, like, God forbid, COVID was twice as deadly, could everybody agree to say, all right, we need to all wear masks and stay socially distanced? And if you have any sort of symptoms, then you have to, quarantine yourself. If there are any virus that had any sort of element like that, could we seriously, with the amount of distrust and disinformation that's going on right now, could we seriously come to a unified action? I don't think so. And in terms of a pandemic and trying to curb a major outbreak, that is crucial. So if we can't do it, it's scary, pretty much. And so, kind of to close out, because I rambled a lot about this, but I have a lot of thoughts on it. The pandemic brought up a lot of dark spots for us as humans, as a humanity, as a society. It did. Beyond just the virus claiming lives and killing people and essentially picking off sick, elderly, weak, it brought up a lot of dark spots in terms of how we socialize, in terms of, our desires, our supply chains, our work schedules, our work supply, um, and it made us look at ourselves differently in the mirror. And I'm not sure that we're ready to face that obstacle again. Which, if you follow history, this isn't the first time we've had a pandemic, and it won't be the last. Hopefully, it won't be one soon, but if there is the case, which you never can, fully tell or prepare for, I'm not confident that we really could handle that again. Or that we could handle it, but that so many people wouldn't just flip out and either out of apathy or inability to handle it, do something reckless or cause more harm than good for the rest of us. I think that, we have to regain a sense of normalcy, and we have to regain a sense of what is the new standard or the new baseline for us. Because if we don't, I think we will continue to live in this kind of wait and see type of game that we're in. And it'll just continue being in this kind of anxious spot that we won't know how to deal with. And so the question that I will pose to you all and close is just in your mind, what do you think it'll take to get us out of this pandemic holdup? I think it'll take time. I think it'll take people having trust in a central type of figure, or not a central figure, but trust in, the world, the people, empathy in the people around them, trust in, our leaders, or, who's dealing with helping combat these viruses, and helping us in emergency operations and emergency situations. I think it'll take a lot of things, but I'm interested to know, in your mind, what kind of will get us there. And so, thank you all. I appreciate you tuning in, listening to me talk. Again, follow me on socials, Instagram, RTD underscore III. Again, RTD underscore III. That's 3 I's. Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Don't mind the sirens in the background. I guess somebody might be in trouble. And again, appreciate you all tuning in to the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I'm your host, Robert Davis. Appreciate you all. Take care.